us. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. As it relates to our Crossland audit, we have received a management letter today, and that letter was appropriately signed as requested, information reviewed, letter signed, and returned. Second to that, I do want to back up and share that we have, that we have met with our Crossland audit team, and we will continue to do so throughout the year to make sure that we are addressing the material weaknesses and any other items that were outlined in the audit. And that concludes the update on the audit at time.
Okay, and as per our CEO review committee, we have in our goals for that position to oversee and make sure our audits are completed in a timely fashion at NGH, and then thus being able to cascade that information to Metro. And so we are in hopes of having everything completed and get in the end of October going forward. So I know that Dr. Blackledge and Keith Moran, our controller, have made a commitment to work proactively with Crossland, and we're excited to have that piece kind of be closed and also on time going forward. So thank you both for your commitment. With that, I would ask for a motion to approve the financials and audit report from Crossland. So moved. Is there a second? I will second that. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is our budget update. Dr. Blackledge.
Thank you again, Chair. So from a budget update, we have completed our operations budget. We're prepared, and we've shared that information with Metro. We are focused right now on our capital budget. The intent is to complete that up tomorrow, to have that submitted prior to the end of this month. So therefore, capital and operations will be submitted. And if there are questions related to our subsidy request, we are prepared to respond to those. And I think we have meeting invites the month of March. This is March, the month of April. I believe that is to discuss that with our city partners. But both are, one is complete and one is 90% there as capital. That's our budget update.
Great, thank you. Any further questions from our committee? Okay. The next item on the agenda is contracts. So, Dr. Mark Brown, you are our first up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first contract is a service agreement for Fujifilm. It's a 3D mammo unit that's located at the Bordeaux Clinic in the Imaging Center. Tim Farmer is the director for that department, and I'm the executive over that area. And so what we're asking is for a 5-year agreement at a price of $3,000 per year. And that piece of equipment is coming off of a 12-month warranty at this point.
Okay, Dr. Brown, I did have an opportunity to spend quite a bit of time with Dr. Brown and Melanie Thomas, the two individuals who are proposing contracts that, over this past week. And Dr. Brown, I believe you and I had a conversation about this specific contract. And just if you'll maybe review those comments.
Yes, so what the Madam Chair and I spoke about is some of these contracts that we can put off. That's a brand new piece of equipment that we installed, will go out of warranty at the end of April. But I felt like that we could do time and materials on that piece of equipment because of the utilization of it. And so what that means, time and materials, that if something goes out, we'll pay for the technician's time and then whatever material cost that would be. And so, and then we also talked about delaying. If we feel like in the future we need a warranty, we can always actually go back and get a contract for that piece of equipment. So that was our conversation on that piece of equipment. So the thought process is that we would delay that piece of equipment at this time.
And this is good for how long again?
Well, the equipment is there for, it's a, the equipment we're leasing for 5 years. Mm-hmm. So it's there for 5 years, Normally, we get a service agreement on it, but because the equipment is brand-new equipment, we felt like we could delay this here at a later time and come back if we felt like it needed a service agreement.
You comfortable with that?
Do you feel like, I mean, it's inevitable that we'll need a service agreement?
At some point, it would, maybe a year, 2, maybe even 3 years down the road, then we could look at a service agreement, but that's not uncommon practice in imaging departments.
So the idea is that since it's new, we're unlikely to incur an expense that we would need to be covered by.
Unlikely, but not exclusive, Dr. Martin. I mean, you know, I've had departments where we would put off buying a service agreement right away after the equipment, especially if it's new. Now, if it was 15 years old, I'd be saying something different to you. But because it's brand new equipment, it's just running out of its warranty. I don't feel like that we need to go ahead and then put another warranty on it, you know, and we agreed that we would look at it maybe 6 months to a year down the road if we decide then at that point we needed one.
So you're withdrawing this
Yes.
from consideration?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
One quick question is, I can't remember if we discussed this, is will the contract price, if we delay 6 months, a year from now or so, does that go up exponentially or?
Not exponentially. It may increase a little bit, but it wouldn't increase exponentially. And you know, when we do these deals, it's like a package deal. We can decide what we want or don't want. And we normally work with the vendor, whoever that could be, whoever that is. Even if you wait, you know, a year or two for that contract, at that time, you'll probably have more people able or capable of working on it. Like this one, it has to be exclusively with Fuji because it's a brand new piece of equipment and it has proprietary stuff on it. So the likelihood of someone else being able to work on it is not real. It's not going to happen. But you know, in a year or two, it goes out and then more people are able or capable of working on it. So I don't see that as being a significant increase over the next year or so.
So if it does go down and then next year, we would still have Fuji coming to repair it? It's just that we would have to pay for the repair instead of having, okay.
And here's going to be a question that I'm going to ask very often. I want to make sure that this is state of the art, you know, cutting edge, whatever, you know, the best. Yes.
It's on. Actually, we could do stereotactic if we had so desired to do it there, but we don't do it there. We do it here at the hospital. So it is state-of-the-art equipment.
Any other discussion? I appreciate that. So we will go ahead and defer that contract. The next contract then to discuss also, Dr. Brown, would be Radon Medical Imaging. And let me just also state, I appreciate the time that both Dr. Brown and Melanie Thomas took with me. We are doing a lot deeper dive as a committee, and I know myself personally committed to understanding these contracts in a way that I'm sure at some point can be annoying when I ask 50,000 questions. So I just want to let you know, I really appreciate your time, dedication to helping our committee, myself, understand this going forward and the relevance of these contracts. One thing on that side note, I would just like to talk about is the process. So, you know, going forward, I know I've talked with Dr. Elders and Dr. Blackledge about the contract request sheet, even the process of that, and having that be uniform and consistent with an executive leadership team, as well as the requester being on that sheet, looking at the previous costs and terms on that sheet, the revenue that was generated or expected to be generated on that sheet, as well as an exit strategy. So again, I think we're trying to make these succinct and consistent, easy to understand for us at a committee and board level, and really digging into the why. Is this a critical piece that affects quality of care? Is this a critical piece that we need to protect our hospital? and making sure that we are prioritizing those items first and foremost over everything else going forward. So thank you for your time, and go ahead with radon.
Okay, so this is a piece of equipment that the finance chair just sort of talked about. Her and I had a long conversation over this particular piece of equipment. It's a rad floral unit, a refurb unit, and thanks to the finance chair, I actually did a lot more digging on this here, then got a lot more information. So this piece of equipment was installed in 2030, and the useful life of imaging equipment is normally about 7 years is the useful life on it. So we can see that we far exceeded that. We spent about 3 or 4 months digging into it, trying to get it to work and see if we could get it back up, but that was to no avail. And so by the time we got through the process, I shared with the finance chair that it took us almost 8 months to get this to the board. And so I got great questions from her as to why that took that long, and I shared with it was a priority. I also shared with her how much the machine made over the last 3 years. I think the last year was around $250,000. The question was where did those patients go to? We talked about that. Sometimes providers practice according to what they have, so they divert certain cases. Some of those cases was picked up with CT. Some of them were picked up on ultrasound. So what we're requesting is a refurbished R&F room and a C-arm that will go to the OR to help with caseload with the new orthopedic surgeon that we're getting. And so the total cost of that was $330,000. If we finance that monthly would be $5,500 to a little over $6,000 a month on a 5-year contract.
So, do we have a working C-arm?
We do have a working C-arm, Dr. Martin. It is it was installed in 2013.
Okay.
And so so I don't want to use, I was going to tell you the II, but it's the part that actually takes the source in the image and puts it up on the screen. Yeah. It's a little fuzzy because of the age, that intensifier wears out, sort of like an old camera. It wears out, and so visibility becomes a little bit harder to visualize in cases.
And will you still be able to use the old machine?
We'll still use it because we'll probably need both of them with that surgeon.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
And I see where bids were received, so this was the...
Yes, ma'am. So if you went and bought a new C-arm, it would be twice as much as, a little bit more than twice the amount for that C-arm. An R&F room at this level would be about $490,000 for the unit. Total cost just for the R&F room.
We'll be paying for this on a monthly basis? So
Yes,
this
ma'am.
$5,000 is, okay, so that is, going forward, we'll have that built into our cost
Yes,
structures?
correct.
And hopefully we'll be able to recover this $250,000 or so of lost revenue annually?
Yes, ma'am.
No. Okay, great. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the radon medical imaging contract. I'll second that. No further discussion. All in favor? Aye, motion passes. Next up is Practice Resource Network. Dr. Brown.
Yes, ma'am. So this is a contract that we have, and what this contract is for the imaging center at Bordeaux. The state requires a report out on all outpatient imaging centers. And so the state has 3 companies that they choose, PRN being one, THA used to be another one, and then there's a third one. I can't recall the name of that one. But we went with PRN, and Madam Chair, I went back and did some more research on that one as well. It's the same cost for all 3 entities, but THA doesn't do that. So it's 35 cents per click, depending on up to $250 per quarter. That we have to report, and so and so what they do is they validate our information to make sure that the the images or the procedures that we're doing are warranted. So they sort of oversee that, so that makes sure that we don't have overutilization of things like MRCT and that type of thing. So we have to report that to the state, and that is a state requirement.
Any discussion, questions? Okay. If not, I will entertain a motion to approve. So moves, is there a second? Okay, any further discussion on the Practice Resource Network agreement? All in favor? Aye, motion passes. Next is the triage solutions.
Right. So TriHas is a waste management company that comes in and disposes of our waste, things like medications and stuff that we that we've put into box to be disposed of. And so we currently have a contract with Cinta. I can't remember the name of the company that we have, but we currently have a contract with SteriCycle for this particular contract. So we're paying that. One of the things that I was shared is that we can save about $10K if they change the plan a little bit on this contract, but they are a waste disposable organization.
Why are we changing companies?
We think that we will get a better service from this company. We've had some challenges with the other company with pickup and stuff, and so we were going to move to this company and give notice and transition over to TriHas.
And what's the cost comparison with?
It was about 10 to 15K per year savings.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
And the cost, just to clarify, the cost savings is by swapping companies, or is?
It's by changing the plan. So some things that the company we're doing that we can take on that we can do ourselves.
What other competitors are out there other than your colleagues mentioned? SteriCycle is who we have currently, but what other options are there besides Waste Management and SteriCycle?
I'm quite sure, Madam Chair, there's probably several different companies. I'm not acutely aware of off the top of my head which companies are out there, but I can go withdraw this one and come back with several companies that we can actually look at.
The current group, SteriCycle, when is their contract up?
I think we're on a month-to-month with them currently.
And is there an opportunity if the contract, let's say the contract is up, well, you said it's month-to-month, so we're already month-to-month. So It's not a problem if we would decide we want to get further bids. There's not a problem with them not doing the service next month or the month after, is that correct?
No, there isn't.
Well, I would certainly prefer further investigation just to see, because if there's some things that you're going to take on, that means there's going to be more work incurred on the institution here, and I don't see where that would be very helpful and such. But anyway, if we could look at it, I would like that.
Okay, Dr. Nettles. Mm-hmm.
Sure. Dr. Hudson, any comment?
I think as you all are discussing that, I think my only thought process as we're engaging in this dialogue is like, what is the overall process for a lot of these bids? So I'm sure they have done the due diligence in investigating a few. I think it'll be helpful for us, though, when we sit here and make those decisions to know what the overall process, how many companies do we typically look at? What, is it a service type of thing versus cost? Like, what all things go into it? So it's kind of hard sometimes to.
So I'm just going to chime in, Dr. Hudson. So the Madam Chair and I, we actually had a conversation about this contract last week, right? And I shared with her that I actually saw this company and we used them in Georgia when I was the department director. And so that's how we got to this company. But truly, if there was investigation like Dr. Nettles is saying, I think we should probably do that and not just come with one. And then actually look at the different plans to see, are we doing the same thing? And then see what we can take on as an organization and what we can't take on as an organization. I think that would be the way to go.
Yeah, I was just concerned with taking on extra
Right.
work.
So.
Yeah, I agree with all of my colleagues, fellow board members' comments. I think, again, the process is, I know that's, with Dr. Elders, that's being looked at a high level to review the process, make sure the process is intact. I know in future conversations we're going to have with Melanie Thomas, so is it a true RFP? Or is it more of an RFI that's into a request for information? So we're getting a quote, but maybe we don't go through the full process. So I think, having a better understanding of that, having that designated on this kind of one sheet that people fill out, and having the appropriate and attached other quotes, bids, what's the process? Because I think we're digging deep, right? And it makes us feel more comfortable, and it provides more transparency and trust. So I appreciate the comments, and we'll go ahead and defer this one.
Okay.
Next up is the electronic registry system.
Okay. So this is one of those that actually is a state requirement for our cancer program. And we talked about this last Friday. It's one that tracks cancer patients, and it reports to the state those patients that have cancerous findings. So this is a must-have contract. It's mandated by the state. And then I actually attached or sent out to the chairman the requirements and the statutes that's associated with this here particular contract.
Does the committee have any questions for Dr. Brown at this point? Okay. So one of the things I had clarified with Dr. Brown, and I continue to ask in my discussions with members of the executive leadership team, is what is absolute necessary? What is required by law? What is required by reporting? And this is a contract that I do believe, and the prior one that we approved, is required by law and necessary. It is the provider, or the providers are neutral in terms of cost structure. So I do think that, again, just the education around that gives us a lot of comfort level when we're approving.
Just a point of clarity, and is this the only vendor that provides this particular service?
They actually are listed on the state's website.
Okay. Doesn't get more credible than that.
Right. It's the same thing like with PRN. You only had a choice of 3 people.
Okay.
And really 2, because THA doesn't do it anymore. So the state sort of dictates who you're going to pick as a vendor.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And he had also mentioned on our call that the costs are the same, so you don't get a benefit by going, I think, one to the other.
Correct.
So that you're more uniform. Okay.
One other question, would this help streamline some of the information gathering and recording and things of that nature? Because I do know that paper is still used by some, and because as a backup, I mean, it's just excellent practice. But will this help with, and then also with the new medical records? All of this will be.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes. That's sort of all collated into the
Okay.
path reports, the radiology reports, all that information they get, and then they send to the state after they scrub it.
Okay.
Mark, in the packet, it looks like this contract is already signed. Is it already intact?
This one here, I saw that the other day, Dr. Martin, and that's not it.
It's on page 5 in the packet.
And I saw Dr. Webb's signature on that, and
Says
it was
effective
2/27,
2/27.
but we didn't move it forward with that signature because we wanted to bring it back to the board here to get approval on it.
Okay.
That's why this one is back. But I noticed that when Madam Chair and I was talking last Friday that it was already signed, but we felt like it needed to come back to the board to make sure that that was going to be legit.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
I would ask, and maybe Derek with legal, Derek, is this something where we need to, since we're approving it effective March 27th, it sounds like we probably need to have the appropriate personnel sign this for the right effective date based on approval?
It's 2/27.
Is when, it says addendum effective February 1st, 2025. It was signed by Dr. Webb on 2/27/2025. And then Kevin Freeman as the Chief Commercial Officer of Health Catalyst on March 5th. So I think from a legal standpoint, we'd like to get your opinion on that before we're signing contracts that were previously dated.
I would like to point out that this contract is below the threshold for contracts to come to the board, and I think.
Yeah.
3-year was the key why it come back to the board. It's a 3-year
It's a
contract.
3-year contract.
So it hits below the threshold, but it's a 3-year contract,
Oh, I
which
see.
requires board
I got it.
approval.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So it should have come.
Yes, sir.
My recommendation is the contract be dated as the date of approval, with recognition that there have been services performed prior to it, or to the extent there were any, and that the vendor would be compensated under the terms of this contract for any prior, if you did any business with them before this approval. That's typically how we do it. We do not recommend the practice of backdating your business.
Okay, so,
So I would suggest it have today's date, and if necessary, in order for the parties to be able to work out invoices or any services, that it reflect that the parties understood something may have been performed prior to the effective date, and that the party will be appropriately compensated.
Right,
That's
okay.
how we generally deal with that issue, but I can't speak to what's already happened prior to today.
so is that something Christy Lewis can work with and make any kind of addendum on our end? Okay. I think that's the way we need to look at these things going forward. There should never be a date that precedes this approval process at the full board company. So thank you, Christy, for handling that and your thought process on that, Derek. Okay. I didn't move on that, did I? Oh my God, I'm losing my mind. Okay. All right. On that note, we will go ahead and request a motion to approve effective March 27th with the understanding that amendment will be created by our Chief Compliance Officer that would effectualize the amendment process to include the February 1st date of service and appropriately invoice to that. Do I hear? Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. All right. Next up is, Sophos with Melanie Thomas.
Good afternoon. This contract is a renewal of an existing software service that we currently use. The vendor is Sophos. This is our antivirus provider. This is our first line of defense for malware and suspicious activity. I don't know who was on the board about 3 years ago. We had a security event where attackers actually got into our systems. We were able to shut them down very quickly. This is the vendor that protects us from more of that happening. We have people attempting all the time. Not having this in place would be very detrimental. This is absolute business practice. Our director, Adam Bertram of IT, is the one who's actually presenting this to us. We've looked at multiple other vendors. We have the vendor that we're switching from to another vendor because it's just slightly cheaper, about $2,000 over the 36 months. We looked at multiple different ways. If we did a 1-year contract, it would be about $61,000 a year, so $20,000 more ultimately over the 3-year term. There was another vendor that we looked at that was $174,000 per year. And then the other vendor that we switched from was just a little bit more this year versus last year, about $10,000 more, which is why we really started looking to see could we get better pricing. This also protects us in healthcare. There are a lot of end-of-life systems that we keep running for information that we may have to go for babies. We have to keep them for 18 years records. And so we end up having to carry a lot of old systems. So we have to have this in place to protect those old systems that may not be supported by Microsoft or Windows or whomever and stay up to date. So this is a absolute necessity. This contract expires at the beginning of May. As part of some of the changes in our process here, we will be attempting to bring them forward about 3 months in advance. But this one is where we are. We have to have it. Any questions?
Okay. Seeing no other questions for Melanie Thomas, I would entertain a motion to approve the Sophos contract. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Next contract is Presidio.
So Presidio does our network monitoring. They are a preferred vendor, and they provide the next level of support beyond what the expertise that I have here in the organization. And I have people with the highest level of certifications in the organization here, but sometimes there are things that happen that we aren't able to do quickly because we're not presented with it on a weekly, monthly, daily basis as some of our partners. Presidio also helps us not just in one area of network services. They help with our system administrator duties, our security duties, just everything all encompassing. So this is, they provide monitoring for any moves, adds, and changes that we have. This is a 36-month arrangement. We also have had additional equipment because of our Cerner implementation. So there's some growth calculated into this. Once again, in this one, we informally look at other vendors just since we're doing it every 3 years to make sure we're getting the best deal. But also in our industry, it's very disruptive to make changes. So we really consider changes very gingerly. We want to make sure that we get excellent service from Presidio. They are a partner. When I spoke about the security event that we had several years ago, even in areas that they weren't contracted for, they partner with us. So this is a gold standard partnership that we have with them. One of the things that Christy asked that I just touched upon is, could we hire in this role to replace this contract? So for the $416,000 that we have, it would probably take me, and that's a 3-year, it would probably take me 3 to 4 6-figure salaries. So we would almost triple our cost to cover what Presidio covers for us. And even with that, we still wouldn't have the 24/7, 365 coverage that we have with Presidio.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
So I see this is a capital expenditure request form, a form for the request. Is this something that we can take from the capital funds that was provided from the mayor's office, or should that be?
This is more of an operational cost. The capital expenditure form is probably in the optimization that we'll be doing. It'll be a better form that's reflective of what it is. So this is just what we have used in the past. So not really capital here.
So part of the operation budget?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hudson. I was going to ask the same thing. I like this form a lot better than what we've been seeing. And one thing in particular I like is that we're given the budgeted amount. So this is not a brand new contract. It was not budgeted. It was budgeted. Now it's a little under 20% higher than we put in the budget. And is that based on the pricing from this company on the current year?
It's based on the fact that we've added more equipment this year, so they have more to monitor.
Right.
But there's also, they don't increase annually over the 3 years, so we get a big increase at the end. So even just any other vendor, even if you saw with the Sophos contract, there was a bigger ask at the end of that 3-year term because they freeze the pricing for those 3 years.
That all makes sense, but my main point was I like seeing something that was already budgeted and for how much. Thank you.
And just a side note, you did mention on the call that there is a component where we will be actually saving, it's about $16,000 a year in cost structure due to the fact that and I'm still trying to understand all the technology piece of it. I mean, sometimes I'm lucky if I can get my computer to work, so I'm usually not the techie, but, we have tried to better understand the staffing, what they are covering, which I think we talked about with Dr. Brown's contract as well, and do some of the service contracts comparative to staffing. How does that benefit us? What is the training? Does it make sense to employ some, let's say, tuition assistants to get them more credentialing, so then it takes away from some of the service contract costs, et cetera. And so I do think that that is something that is part of the conversation and narrative. But I do think, just so you know, as a board level, and a committee level, it is something I want to recognize. So is it better to hire comparative to subcontract? Is there certain people who have hired that can get a higher level of education or designation that then again pulls back from this contract where we're not adding to the FTEs? So just so you know, those questions are being asked. I would encourage you to, as you're on the committee, dig deeper and ask those types of things as your experiences come to light here. And I'm glad to see that we have good answers for that. So thank you.
And if I may make a comment, just to piggyback on Dr. Martin, as Dr. Elders continues to streamline this process and what it looks like when contracts come before us, if there is a standardization process, if we could have just some type of recognition flag box that says, yes, this has already been in the budget. This wouldn't be new funds. Yes, we discuss it, but it'd be great to be able to have this information in advance prior to the committee meeting and just know, oh, this is something we've been doing. Here are the advantages. Here's any, deviation from what was budgeted. Here's the overage or the savings that we have as we make discussions so that we can come here and maximize our time.
Agree, and thank you for those comments. I think being able to look at those trends going forward will be, very helpful to us too, as we not only budget, but also in terms of cost savings. If there's no further comments, I will move do I have a move for approval of the Presidio contract? So moved. Is there a second? No further discussion. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Cisco Security Enterprise.
Cisco Security Enterprise Agreement is a bundle of two things. One is our identity services engine, which is 12 months, and our Cisco multi-factor authentication, which is 36 months. You'll see that we have that budgeted amount of $241,000, and it's gone down to $161,000 over a 36-month term. This is because with the Cerner implementation, we replaced a couple of firewalls, and those firewalls have their own warranty, so we were able to pull them off of this contract, at least for these 3 years. With that, the multi-factor authentication is very much like your bank sending you a text message to say, are you this person? So when you log into our systems, especially when you are not on ground, it will send you a text. It will authenticate that you are who you are, so that we know that no one is trying to get into our system. If you can't provide the correct code, we will not let you in. So this is another layer of protection that we have steadily increased year over year. 3 years ago, we didn't have this multi-factor authentication. We then put it in place on our email systems, and we are growing that every single year to the point that we want to make sure that people that are getting in really do belong in here. This, again, is one of Adam Bertram's contracts. Like I said, 36 months for the multi-factor authentication. There are other vendors that we have looked at. Okta is another vendor that we've looked at as well. The price for Okta was more expensive. Also, the Duo multi-factor authentication is a coordination with Cerner. So Cerner uses Duo, so it makes it streamlined so that our users are seeing the same thing across all of the systems. This is again, something that would be very disruptive to replace. It would impact every single user in this organization, and they would have to learn a whole new system. So we don't go into changing these things lightly, but we do take a look at it and make sure that it makes sense for us. And in this case, it does.
Somewhere in here, there's a reference to Fortinet,
Yes.
and is that something that's going to replace this? And if so, do we only need 1 year of this, or?
Fortinet are the firewalls that I was talking about that we pulled out that made this contract go down from 241 to 161. So they are the things that are under warranty there. Fortinet is ICE. We are looking at partnering with them a little bit later. It would replace this. The ICE is a 12-month contract, so we can look at that in a few months to see if we can make that transition. This contract is expiring now, so this is one that we would definitely need to see move forward. Again, as we optimize our process, we will be looking to bring these contracts ahead 3 months in advance.
Any further comments? So I will entertain a motion to approve the Cisco Security Enterprise contract. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes.
Okay. My final contract is a Presidio contract. It is for managed detection and incident response. This is a 36-month contract. You will see a large escalator in this as well. This is for security and event management. So we do have somebody who is monitoring 365 days of the year, 24/7 in this one as well. We have increased the number of devices that we are monitoring. We are monitoring about 1,200 devices now, partially due to the Cerner implementation, partially due to the growth and change of things in the organization. We have considered other managed detection resources, but they were ultimately higher. And again, it's disruptive to make changes in our areas. The biggest thing I will continue to point out is what we don't get by just doing it in-house is that 24/7, 365. And because healthcare is a 24-hour business, we don't break for holidays. We do need people who are constantly monitoring that.
Is it pretty standard not to receive a warranty on all of these?
So this isn't hardware.
Okay.
Some of it's hardware. The hardware we do have warranties on for the most part.
But this is more service-oriented? Okay. That makes sense.
These 1,200 devices include telephones, or are they mostly
They do
desktops? They do
No, not the phones, the desktops. Our phone system, that's a whole nother conversation. Our phone system is 25 years old, so you may see me again at some point.
Okay.
What if, do you anticipate the monitoring devices to stay the same, go up, or potentially go down if, and let's say there's less need for those? And then does the contract amount change based on that number?
We typically do an annual look back to see. I think we are solid here at this price, but at the end of that 3 years, there could be an opportunity. I don't see a scenario where we're going to go down significantly enough to make a dent in this contract. But, you know, we could talk to our vendors to say, you know, if we had a significant change, to say, hey, we don't have 500 devices anymore, can we take a look and renegotiate? Typically, after the 12-month contract, so after 12 months, we do get a chance to say, hey, we need more services or less services, so Presidio is usually very good about that. We also have, if we needed to, a 60-day cancellation, but that is subject to termination fees.
So in all the contracts, and I guess maybe this is a question for our contracts group going forward, is building in some type of termination clause. And so I think we'd mentioned that it feels like years ago, months ago on these contracts, but just making sure that we understand our termination language and we have an out. And in this case, like, I feel like, you know, thinking through all the possible scenarios. So if we were to have a reduction of, I don't know, 200 devices, does that, or an increase in theory, does that help our pricing?
Yeah, I think at that point we would, after the year, because we have to do the year, we would give that 60-day notice to term this contract and renegotiate something for a smaller amount of devices.
Okay. And then the last question, I just want to make sure I mentioned this to the board. I'd ask, because we look like we're using so many of Presidio's services, is there a way to, you know, I know, like I use Farm Bureau insurance and I get a multi-use discount. So I'm always wanting to ask for a discount. So I said, you know, is there a way to go to Presidio and say, hey, look, we're using whatever, $1 million a year of your services. We would like to receive whatever 5% discount for that. So are we asking those questions, are we leveraging our relationships across the hospital? That's the first question. And then the second question I would have is, are we leveraging our relationships across the city? Because at the end of the day, you know, Dr. Blackledge and I were on the phone recently and said, hey, what are other, especially with like antiviral systems, you know, Metro is using antiviral systems. Is there an opportunity for us to receive a discount? So
yeah, so we do take advantage of a lot of the discounts that Metro has. So our Dell equipment, our PCs, we are contracted under what Metro uses. So where we can take advantage of that, we absolutely do. As far as premier discounts with Presidio, they do give us discounts, and sometimes even the vendor gives us discounts because Presidio is our premier partner. So we are asking, they are giving, they are working with us to give us best pricing in all occasions. And oftentimes they are, you know, kind of giving us bonus. And I can give you an example on one of these contracts. I can't remember which one. There's a $40,000 line item. If we pulled it out, we would only get $6,000 back because that is the discount that Presidio gave us. So they gave us a huge discount there, but it is, you know, a value of $40,000.
great. Seeing no further questions, do I have a motion to approve the Presidio Security MDR 1.0 contract? Is there a second? Second. Any further discussion? Dr. Elders?
If I may, in response to the feedback on the contract form, so our Chief Compliance Officer as well as our Director of Contract Management has revised that form. We will be doing education. You all will hear me talk about it when we're doing our audit. And so our contract process will be overhauled, and I think you'll see a little more information provided to the Finance Committee and the Board as we move forward presenting contracts. We'll review them as an executive leadership team and prioritize the needs of the organization. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I forgot to say that. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Motion passes. All right. Next item on the agenda is the financial statements. Dr. Blackledge and Keith Moran.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm going to turn it over to Keith, and he's going to cover the financial statements, more of a high level in February, then going back to January if accepted by the chair and the committee, because February data includes January's data. The one thing I do want to point out is we've been having discussions as it relates to our financial statements and are looking at everything in our area of finance. We want to move to this being more informational. If that is accepted by the chair and other members here at the table versus approved. So with that, I'll turn it over to Keith. Talk to us about it. Thank you.
And you do notice that this also includes February, which is last month, for the first time. So, okay. Oh, well, I'm going to go high levels on February statistics. So our average daily census for the month of February was 46.4 compared to a budget of 31. So we did very well, 15 above. The prior year was 28.9, so we were greatly above it. And, the prior month was 28.9 and the prior year was 30.2. So we're greatly ahead of the previous months. So our clinic visits were 4,321 for the month compared to a budget of 3,524 and compared comparable to the prior month of 4,334 and above the previous year at this time of 3,718. So our hospital case mix for the hospital was 1.14, which is good, and our budget was 1.31. Now, our Medicare case mix was 1.56, which is good, compared to the budget of 1.42. So any questions about statistics or?
I was going to point out that this was the first time we have received the previous month's statistics. So thank you very much for making that happen, and we look forward to having that every time, hopefully. And I was, a couple of things that I look at every month is average daily census. And to me, the average daily census is obtained by adding the ADC inpatients to the observation numbers. And we hover around 30 to 35. Last month was 53. I've never seen that in the 3.5 years I've been on the board. So hopefully that's a trend as well. Finally, one of the things that I look at, my eyes generally go straight to the year to date. And one of the clinical activities I look at is med-surg visits. And in January, we were behind because the budgeted med-surg clinic visits were 36,000, but I noticed in February, budgeted year-to-date is 28,000. I'm trying to figure out, when you add a month, how can it go down?
It should not, so we'll have to investigate that. So
Okay.
It should not go down. So.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we'd love to hear back about that. Thank you.
So these statistics have been a little bit of a bear for us since Cerner conversion. So the Cerner conversion, as far as finding statistics, has been an opportunity for us. So you like that. So also,
Before we move that, I think that's one reason I need to address that, Dr. Martin. I would like to address that. That's one reason that we want to move to informational till we do our complete due diligence around that aspect of the statistics and the financial statements.
Okay, lost my train of thought. So let me. Okay, let's go to the income statement. I'll jump to the net patient revenue for the month was $780,000 below what we had budgeted, and also below the prior year of $5,018,000. Year to date, Our net patient revenue was $40,464,000. I'm gonna round these off. Compared to a budget of 41, so we're still slightly below budget year to date of $1.3 million. But we are above the prior year of $37 million. So our expenses for the month, we were at $14.9 million for the month compared to a budget of $12.18. So we continue to have variance issues with salaries, contract labor, contract services, but we're looking at those different line items, which also includes physician services, repair and maintenance. I don't know if you want to go any more detail than that, but we're looking at those areas to see where we can save money in those areas. One new slide I have put in here that will give you an idea. I put a pie in here, so it gives you a visual of how the expenses are broken down. The center of this pie is the budget, and the outside is the actual. So you get a good idea of how much salaries and benefits, and also the orange is contract labor. So you definitely can tell that more than 50% of our expenses is labor. And that's not counting any contract services that we have, such as the IT group, some of the IT people, and other groups. So, any questions about that tie? Okay. Ethel?
I like pictures.
So I'm going to start showing you more pictures. So.
I appreciate the visual representation of the numbers. The quick question about contract services, you mentioned this just a moment ago. So as an example, contract services, for us, just describe the differences between the two, between services and labor, how that has been in the past, and how that will be categorized going forward in the future, as well as any spillover to salary and benefits, because I feel like there was a little bit more of a commingling or overlap in some cases in the past, and describe your process going forward and how that's going to change.
Well, the way we do contract labor is supposed to be labor working, like they're an employee, but their contract is the way it's supposed to be. Now, in the past, it looks like they've commingled it and moved it to contract services. So there's been a little bit of both. But our philosophy is it should be someone like if you contract out a certain service, then you count those individuals as labor. So it's like where they actually direct their services.
So an example would be like we use Qualivis for nursing, some of the clinical traveling nurses, right?
So they're all
that's
contract labor.
That's considered contract labor, and it would be categorized and flow through the object code for contract labor services. And the reason the categorization is so important is because it allows us to, one, make good decisions, right? And to be competent and confident about the decisions that we're making. And then when there's an opportunity where we need to do some variance analysis within our drill down, it gets us right to the root cause. Now, what we have today, because you did ask about the future, what we have today, the reason that we have to look at where we apply our invoices to and to make sure it lines up with that object code is because we have, let's just say, Orkin pest control. So that may be coded in contract labor. That clearly is a good example of something that is not contract labor, right? And so for us, we want to move that, or moving forward, we want to make sure that that invoice, it goes to, that amount goes to, and the naming convention of the organization goes to the right category. So when we begin to look at trends, as we talk about taking a deep dive into analysis and really overviewing and looking at our trends and making decisions, understanding them, working with the departments, we have to have the confidence and competence that all these items are lined up appropriately. And so that's just an example that I'll peel forward and bring for you for the kind of the future and why that's important for us.
Because we have to be consistent in what we're doing. In some of the cases have been, we haven't been consistent, so.
How, just as an idea, do you see the pie shifting quite a bit? Or do you think it's going to be maybe more immaterial changes? But I was just curious as to, now that you've had a chance to dig a little deeper.
Right. So that's literally what I want to talk about. Not only do I see changes within the pie, so I see adjustments over time, right? Because this is not a 30-day turnaround. It takes time for things to flow through our custom workflow and how we work, right? But that's what I want to talk about next. So Keith, we probably can, if you're okay, Chair, if I move right into it.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yeah. So what Keith talked about was the numbers and the statistics on paper and shared the graph with us, for which we appreciate. I want to talk about the work that we have did over the last 30 days and then the work that we're going to do over the upcoming 30 days and bring that relevance to the numbers we just looked at for month in February. So one of the things that I talked about in our last meeting was economics, accountability, and culture. Economics is how we make choices, decisions, and how we allocate resources. And then the accountability is us owning the current situation and moving towards the future and how we are going to address the situation. And then the culture is the way in which we work and get things done and how we execute on those activities. So just a reminder of the budget piece. And in this third column, this is a take from last month. And last month, we talked a little bit about this. I actually walked through it. And so one, we looked at net patient revenue, which was at $67 million. And so that is an increase of $1.3 million over this current year. And then the city subsidy, so this is, again, the budget that we proposed, the city subsidy at 66, bringing our total patient revenue to 164. But where we began to really make adjustments is in our labor category and in our non-labor category. So combine those two categories, create all of our expenses, and at 161 million. So just to kind of remind us of where we were last month. And so in order for us to do that, we would be seeking a decrease of about 8 million. So I want to talk a little bit about that because that's really the work that we've been doing over these last 30 days. We can go to the next slide and talk a little bit about how we're going to get there. So where we are, we've talked a little bit about our budget, and we know that we are going into this upcoming budget year with some categories that we anticipate a decrease on. We said 6 million. We talked a little bit about that. And so when we look at this salary expense, that right now is TBD because we have to look at certain things, but we do know that we need to put a pause on hiring. And I say that for multiple reasons. And it's not to take away from our employee base. We need people to do the work. So I want to make sure my message is clear. We need people to get work done. So that's a clear message. However, we have to look at who we are onboarding to the organization and the value of that role and the benefit to the organization and do that equitably across the board. So what that means is understanding that we have a hiring freeze. We also need to have what we call position control governance, and that is looking at all of the roles that are coming to the organization. Should this position be replaced? What is the value of it? I'll use an example. If it is contract labor, are we able to go out and bring that position in-house and put it on position control? But it gives us kind of the world view of things at NGH, right? Because right now we look at these all in 8 different buckets. You have to have one place to consolidate them to share that picture of the NGH world. So that one's to be determined. The second bucket is contract labor expense. We have about $5 million that we're reducing from contract labor expense. That comes across probably 26 to 30, and we have a very detailed list of each one of those with the vendors. We've met with the vendors. Christy and team are executing all of the term notices. So whether it's an elimination or a term, that's being addressed in this bucket. And so we have our end date. We know that that reduction is going to come over time. So by the time we hit May and as we move into June, those expenses should be paid out, and then that's eliminated and we're moving on. Contract services expense. So we've got about 1.2 coming out contract services. Again, that's different from labor. These are services that are being provided to the organization. So there may be some services around, we use a system to help us manage our priorities in the organization. It's based from the Covey system. It is called 40X. It is a service, and I'm just using that as an example of some of the items that are paid out of this category. And so we've got to review that, but we do have 1.2, and I have those services that will be eliminated, right? I have the names of all those without going into that level of detail here. So we've got about 1.2, I think there are about 4 or 5 services, and those services have been discussed. Then lastly, we have clinic changes in operation. So looking at our Bordeaux urgent care, we have to recognize areas where performance may not be where we believe that it should be. And so in our review, and those dollars are TBD because we've made the decision, but we have to recognize what that looks like in terms of dollars and understanding if there's lease equipment or FTEs, whatever it is, we have to understand that to put a dollar value to it. So those are 4 categories and items and task initiatives that we've been looking at over the last 30 days and taking the necessary action to what I say we call shifting gears. And the last one, the clinic change. Sometimes in this business, we shrink to grow. And so we shrink to reset ourselves, reposition ourselves so that we can grow and then look at what is the world of opportunities next. We can go to the next slide. All right, contract labor. This is just more detail of how we are doing the work. And so contract labor, what you see there in red is you see our run rate and projection for this current fiscal year that we are in of 25 at 15.8. And then you see our budget for the upcoming year for contract labor at 10.9. So that's our $5 million. And so our pathway from our current position to the future has more clarity today, right? And so we want to share that with our board to make sure our board understands the path that we intend to use to get us to where we should be. And then contract services, again, is through contract elimination. And then the Bordeaux urgent care is under performance evaluation, TBD. We believe that we would be looking at a closure date around May 1st. But again, that is a process for us to go through. So that's a little bit of what the next 30 days looks like from that standpoint. And I'll go to the next slide that just really is a summary. And so when we think about these 4 initiatives that we've undertaken over this most recent time period, we have about 6.2 million with more to come. 2 categories we have pretty well defined. 2 categories we are still focused on and trying to flesh that out and organize. It's like a little puzzle. You kind of put it all together so that we can communicate it to our stakeholders. And then what is next? If we talk a little bit about that, position, 2 things that I really want to highlight, and that's position control governance to allow us to look at our workforce planning and forecasting. And for me, that's looking at managed FTEs, worked hours versus head count, which is, 2 different statistics. And we should be looking at that, understanding how do you tell the story between the 2, right? Because that gives us something to work with. And then cost management, and that's looking at our workforce. I've shared again, or I will share rather, understanding our non-clinical, we have that piece from a contract labor standpoint, not necessarily from a clinical labor standpoint. So when we think about, we have travelers, we might need to look at what we should do. Travelers are great. I've always used travelers. But then how do we leverage the travelers we have with, inside staffing, and how do we balance that? So there's some things that we probably need to do. We need to look at salaries when it comes to our clinical team members. And so that's our cost management piece. And then lastly, under position control is, just the governance, implementation, and oversight. So putting that structure around that piece. And then the Board of Urgent Care, what I call strategic redirection, I kind of gave it away earlier, is shrinking to grow. That's just my layman terms for it, but it's strategic redirection, understanding the operational and financial, what I call impacts to the organization review. So that's going to give us our bottom line, what that TBD should look like in terms of a value to the organization. And then how do we communicate that with the right stakeholders? You know, not just our board, but others. We have partners in the community. We may have leased equipment with someone. We did some marketing. So how do we, and there will be more marketing. So how do we communicate this closure? And I think that's it for me, but it was really just tying back to our board to share, here is what we've been working on over the last 30 days from a finance standpoint, and here is our path forward for the next 30 days.
And the impact of the 6.2 million, are you realizing that? I know some of it's scale because I've seen the contract labor Excel spreadsheet, but with regard to this, how quickly is 6.2 going to be kind of?
So we're going to be looking at how fast we can get those paid out through the system. So that's going to be June or July.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
but
it'll
it'll be in the
effective
first
for the
quarter.
next fiscal year.
Yep. Yes. And that was the plan because we have to make changes. And so it's shifting our gears, it's resetting our team to understand we are working quickly and as best we can to get you the right data to our departments, educating our departments, and then along with what we talked about at the beginning, the economics, the accountability, and the culture. So it's establishing that as part of our day-to-day operations. Yeah, that's it.
Anything further?
I appreciate that. That was very thoughtful.
I agree. And I'm sure that's not an easy decision. So we are saying a Bordeaux closure. Okay.
No. So on Saturday and Sunday, we staff a emergency room physician on Saturday and Sunday for urgent care.
Yeah.
So not the Bordeaux location, but that Saturday and Sunday, it's looking like currently around an average of 2 patients during that 8-hour window. And so looking at that staffing there and making sure we're using those resources appropriately. And so that's what we're looking at, but not the Bordeaux location.
Thank you.
Urgent care only.
Like, am I the only person sitting here like,
you go back to
Oh,
this
no,
one?
gasping?
Let me
So,
clarify.
urgent care.
And I saw it said urgent care. I guess I'm not.
We should have
Yes,
said urgent
ma'am.
care
No, you
only.
did. Yeah, okay. Had
Yeah.
to clutch my pearls. Okay.
I appreciate that. And one of the things that I had taken a deeper dive on, I know I had Keith pull some information and then also followed up with Dr. Blackledge. It's, you know, what are the clinic expenses? What revenue is coming in from those clinics, both in terms of into the clinic specifically and then obviously a cascade and downstream into the hospital. And so I know that, you know, at the end of the day, yes, I believe in having accessibility, and I like the fact that I can, you know, just drive down the street and go to a clinic that's close to my home. But we also have to make sure that whatever we're doing makes actual financial sense. And so I've encouraged the ELT to be thoughtful about, you know, looking not just at our hospitals, but the clinics to make sure what we're doing is the appropriate direction for those and making sure financially that those are sustainable. And we can tie back any revenue that is cascaded down to the hospital and some of the things we have here. I know we're running close to time. Anything else, Dr. Blackledge, Keith, on this report? I know we've got the cash flow and the revenue piece. So any comments on those? I don't want to go over for purposes of the rest of the group here, so.
Yeah, for the purposes of just reporting from a revenue cycle without even looking at going into detail, I do want to point out that post-conversion, we have hit what I would call the floor in terms of cash. There being a delay in receiving the cash from the payers because we were delayed in getting our claims over for a period of time. So with that said, you've got February was 2.6, I think, and there was $600,000 that was not listed or allocated that was in a Medicare take back, but it's really cash that the team earned, so really 3.1 million. And then February was I think it was 2.6 around that without looking at it. But I do want to say March, right now, they're sitting at 4 million with 2 days left. So they've hit the bottom, back up, and I see Faith over there and Mark. So I want to say kudos because it has been a lot of work. It has been pretty tough on this team during this period of time.
One thing I want to add on the balance sheet, if you look on the liability side, non-current liabilities, you'll see they went up $18 million. And that is the capitalization of the Cerner system. We have to capitalize it and amortize it over the life of the lease. And you'll also notice that our cash for February is now at $3.3 million.
And Dr. Blackout had spoken to me too about a acceleration to catch up after the Cerner implementation.
Yes, and so that's normal and customary once there has been this learning curve, but once team members get into this rhythm, you'll see a cash acceleration. And we literally have that budgeted for most of May, some of April. I think it picks up in April, so April and May. We should see that. Some cash acceleration. Any other questions?
Okay. And this item, the financial statements, is actually moving from an approval to an informational at this juncture. And so we've covered financials and revenue cycle. Anything else for our committee? Okay, if not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, second. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the encouraging reports and the work that you put into our future. We do have a quorum present.